Hi, it's Lili Amanda for Portrait Creatives. In this episode, we are going to do a very simple and easy composite. How to turn this to this. When I shot this image of Amber, I just told her, pretend you have a bird on your hand. And that's what she did. She's a dancer. She has incredible ability of imagination and posing. And this photo came out so well. And so let me show you how you can put a bird on her hand. So let me show you this photo. This is real. It's our neighbor. When we babysit him, I took some photo of him. And you can see he just have this fun movement. A first step is to cut real out of this photo and paste on the photo with Amber. If you want to know how to cut up, it's super easy and simple. I have done it in another tutorial and I will leave the link in the description. So we just cut out real and paste on here. You will see it's quite big. So we need to size it down. And that's Command T, free transform. And then I just size it down to what I think it is about the right size of real compared to people size. Okay, and let me just zoom in. I want his feet just land on one of her finger, and the other one looks like he's going to step on the other one. Okay, so that's just the idea I have here. So let me just size him down a tiny bit more about here. Then I move forward tiny bit and size him down tiny bit. I think about here, just right. Just like he sit on the finger here. Okay. And the next thing I'm going to do is just mask out the hand because I want real to be inside her hand. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this area. I'm going to Object Selection tool and I'm just going to select all this area. Okay, so the hand is selected, right? And I'm going to here and just click on this layer mask. And that's the opposite way. So Command I to invert and the V disappear, right? So I need to just paint it back with white brush on the brush, okay, 100% opacity. So paint it all back here. Okay, so that's the correct composition. Oh, no, here, we need to remove here. So let me just do it again. So just brush it carefully. Brush with white brush to show real and real's feet. So it's all coming back here. Okay. So we can just remove this layer mask to see, is everything good? Yes, so that looks great. Let me just see the proportion. That looks great. Let me just move it down tiny bit. Okay, right. And I'm going to move him tiny bit this way. Disconnect this chain and select the layer. And use move tool, just move him a little bit forward. You can see I can move him anywhere without affecting the mask, right? So I'm thinking about here. I think up a bit. I think that's quite good. And then that's it. And I put the chain back. I want to tell you about vanishing point in portraits. Usually is the eye level is the vanishing point. When I shot Amber, it was probably about here. So you can see a little bit under her chin. So it's not eye level, it's about here. It was the vanishing point. And with real, you can see this photo. It's actually I shot a little bit from above. Not too much, but just a tiny bit from above. Okay. And so this composition is actually quite close, but not exactly right. When it's very close vanishing point, it would work. So don't worry too much about it. Especially there's no complicated background and you will look very simple and easy to achieve the believable result. Let me run you through this. First thing, you cut up the subject, and second, you're trying to match the color of the two objects, or there's more, you're trying to match their color with their environment. And then you go on to create shadows. You can see, like with Rio, this is no shadow, so we have to create from scratch. And I will show you how you can do it. And that's create shadow. It's not only just the feet. We need to create shadow on Rio's wing as well, because the light source is from the left. So obviously with Rio over here, the fingers will become darker. If you go and zoom in, you will see Rio is super sharp, right? And it doesn't look right. It's like the focus on him. So I would actually add a little bit blood on him. And if you zoom in even closer, you will also see there's some grain on the picture. So I will also add some grain on Rio. After that, I will do a global adjustment to style this photo to make this image look more cohesive. Okay, so let's go on to make the shadow. Take a look at this photo. The light is very similar to this direction, perhaps a little bit on the back. On the back of me, you can see the light source is about here. And you can see Rio's shadow. It's not black, right? It's never black. Shadow is never black. And with Rio, it tends to be a bit red. And with finger, we have veins as well. So we tend to bounce the light to become quite reddish or orangeish. That's the color of the shadow we are going to create, okay? And let me just come back here. So all the shadow have to create the layer underneath Rio, okay? This is the Rio layer. And then, so I'm going to add a new layer. And I'm going to use my brush, B is brush. And then I'm just going to select this color and hold on Option key or Alt key on the PC. Okay, just this color. I can see there are some black edges here I want to clean up. So I'm going back here on the layer mask. I'm going to use my brush and black, just paint on the edge, okay, of this. This was from the cage, from his cage, so it will become black, and I want to remove it. It will look better when we create the shadow. Okay, the edge is very important. No color cast. The edge is quite important to make it believable. So I'm just going over here. Okay, a little bit more. Just get rid of the black. See, before and after. Okay, I'm zooming a lot, so you will see. If you want to make a detail look good, you usually have to zoom in quite a lot. Okay, so that look good. And I'm going to come to this layer called Shadow 1, because we're going to create more than just one layer of shadow. So I'm come back to my brush and then Option or Alt key to hold on to it and click this area, the shadow area, to sample the color. And usually I will go tiny bit darker, okay? And I click OK, and I'm just going to paint this over. You see, I'm not going to paint over this place because I am underneath of Rio. Okay, so I'm just gonna go something like that. And Command Z is to undo the step, okay, because I wasn't happy, so I'm just gonna undo the step like this. I think this shadow is a little bit too bright, so I'm going to change the color even darker. Okay, I'm just gonna make it quite dark over here. So I'm going to paint it over, just over here as well. Okay, so let me zoom out to have a look. Okay, so and then I will use Gaussian blur. There are many methods to blur the shadow, and I'm just using a very, very quick and easy tool here. So let's have a look. Okay, let me just see how it looks like. It looks quite good already. Okay, I think maybe about here. Okay, I'm gonna click OK and zoom out and see it looks pretty good, right? But I think this shadow is too much over here, so I'm going to use a layer mask just to brush out a little bit and use a black mask. Let me just use opacity 50 and just go over it very quickly so it looks more believable. Okay, so that's before, that's after, right? And then we're going to do second layer of the shadow, okay? And the second layer will be softer than this. Okay, we're going to do 3 layers, and the third layer will be very soft, okay? Because the shadows is gradually built, okay? No shadow, just one tone, okay? Shadows are built in like gradient, and because the light bounces to each other, so the shadow is quite complicated. What we can do is to make it layers and in different strength, so the shadow will look much more believable, okay? And so I'm going to duplicate this layer, okay? And you see immediately become double strong, and I'm going to select the layer here, and use Gaussian blur, Gaussian blur, okay? And this time I'm going to build up even more radius just to have this. You can see this slowly become very, very soft. And I think about here, okay? This is before and after. Okay, so I think this is a little bit strong, so I'm going to use 50%. So that looks very, very nice now. Okay, so I'm going to this is shadow 2. I'm going to rename shadow 2. And I'm going to use shadow 1 just to duplicate this layer. Command J is duplicate. Okay, and I'm going to rename it 3. And I'm going to do filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So this time I'm going to do way like this, way blur. Okay, and then become, this is before, this is after. It looks super cool, right? And I'm going to just reduce the opacity a bit to 80%. That looks very, very good already. And then I want to create, there's a shadow on top of her nail because his little feet is coming towards it, right? So I'm going to add another layer over here. And then the same color, I'm going to use my brush. It's the same colors we sampled before over here. Perhaps a darker area here. We're going to sample here. And then click on this color to change it to a darker tone. Okay, because when it hits some solid background, it will become darker. So I'm going to click OK here. And then I'm going to just use 50% brush. I'm just going to brush over, just like roughly. I think that's the place he would land. Okay, like, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to just use filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and make it quite blur. I think I'm going to paint this tip as well. Okay, let me just do it all over again. Let me just sort of like here. Okay, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Okay, so that looks too strong. Let me just do a little bit. Yes, that looks good. And I'm going to reduce the opacity to maybe 80%. And I'm going to use a layer mask. And I'm going to choose my brush. And I'm just going to paint here a little bit here. Okay, right. That looks good. And then I'm going to create another shadow. It's for her fingers because real obviously is blocking the light source from this direction. I'm going to use curve adjustment layer and use this hand icon just to drag this finger downwards to darken the fingers. Okay, and I'm going to choose Command I to invert the layer mask and then choose the brush and then change to white brush. So press X is the keyboard shortcut to change the color. So I'm just going to paint over here. So this is only affect on Amber's layer. Okay, it's not going to affect Rio's layer because he's above here, just over here. And that's before, this is after. That looks great. And I want to paint a little bit here more, make it look like it's significant darker over here. Okay, I'm going to change the feather a little bit, just bring it up a little bit. And this is before, this is after. Let me see, before and after. Yeah, that looks great. So, and I noticed that there is also need to have some shadow. This area need to be darker. So I'm going to use another curve adjustment layer and use this just to drag it down to darken the area. Okay, and then use Command I to invert the layer mask and change it to a brush and white brush. And then I'm just gonna paint over here. Okay, looks okay. All right, I'm changing back to black brush and just remove here a little bit. Okay, let's zoom out to see before and after. Okay, let me just remove here as well. Before and after. And then I'm going to use feather to see the edges are blur out. That looks good. That looks good. Okay, let me just use the layer mask a little bit. Okay, so let's see. Okay, that looks good, but I think the nail is still a little bit too bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample this color, what we created here, and then I'm going to add a new layer. Okay, and then I'm going to use this color a little bit darker than that, and then I'm just going to paint on this nail because it's supposed to be dark when there's a shadow cast on. So I'm just going to over 50%. This is 100. Let's change it to 100%. Okay, so let me just paint this area. Don't worry about it. It looks super dark right now. It's not the end result, so don't worry about it. We are going to do a little bit more work on it. Once we apply other effects, it will look great. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Okay, so it looks great, but I'm not really happy with the edge. Sometimes you just blur out too much. Let me just see if we can use blur, Gaussian blur. Okay, so let's go way up to about 26, about 20. Okay, that looks good. Let me click OK. So that's before, that's after. Just give a bit more shadow. So that would make sense. And so let's add another layer mask, and then D is come back to default, and I use X keyboard shortcut to change to black brush, and I'm going to brush this area. Just remove it so you can see before and after. Okay, that looks great, right? And then we need to add a shadow. So Rio is a little bit not in the right position, so let me just move him a little bit, I think. So I just adjust him and move him, use the move tool to move him back. You can see I just move him back. I just move the shadow back. All right. He wasn't in the right position because I just moved him. And all I do is I go into this layer mask and just move the layer mask a little bit. All right, until it really just makes sense now. Okay, and then I'm going to just use a white brush to brush him out here. Like all this, make sure his feet is all here. Okay, so let's zoom out to see before, after, right? You can see our shadow. And the next thing is I need to create some shadow on his wing, because the lights from here, he's supposed to have some shadow here. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of Rio. I'm going to add a new layer adjustment curve adjustment layer on top of real. And I'm going to use this hand tool and just come down here, just drag it down to darken it. Okay, and I use Command I to invert, and then brush, white brush, and then I'm just going to paint it over. Okay, I need to use this clip and clip on, because you see here affected Amber as well. But if I clip it, it will only affect real. Okay, just over here, just a little bit shadow over here, right? See, before and after. Okay, so that would make more sense if there's a shadow, right? Okay, I'm going to create another curve adjustment layer. Curves, and then bring this part tiny bit down. Okay, and Command I to invert the layer mask, and then white brush to brush this area. It's supposed to be darker, just the same like we're creating layers. Okay, and here we need to fix this, so go back to the real layer. Here we're going to use a black brush. Okay, so it's about here. I think that's too much, so I'm going to brush it back by using white brush, just tiny bit here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Right, let me see. So I'm going to use this clip on, so only affect the layer on the real swing. Okay, that's before and after. So I'm coming to this curve adjustment layer and then apply to here as well. So here become darker. So this is before, this is after. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So the next thing we are going to do is to blur real a little bit. So I'm going to select real on the layer and then use filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Just a tiny bit, maybe 0.1 or 2. Let me see. Okay, that looks pretty good, 0.5. Okay, and then I'm going to add grain. And it's filter, noise, add noise. So that's too much, and I'm going to bring it down probably about, let's see. That's pretty good. Let's try one. Before and after. Let's see here. Okay, that looks good. And click OK. So that looks great now. I do feel this is too bright. This for just too bright. So I'm going to add another curve adjustment layer. Just curves, and then click on this and then drag it down until I feel it's just the right color. All right, and Command I to invert the layer mask and only brush here. It's just too much. I need to clip this one on. Okay, select here and clip on real again, and then I'm just going to brush here either. And then I'm going to use feather. Okay, so that looks way better. Let's have a look before and after. Maybe tiny bit here, before and after. Okay, so that looks way better. So I'm going to color match these two subjects, but these two are very, very close already. So I'm just going to show you how you can do this, or you can watch another video. I talk about different method to match the subject colors. Okay, so I'm just going to add another curve adjustment layer here. Okay, and I'm going to these three dots, this menu bar here. I'm going to auto option. I would go for this one, find dark and light colors. It doesn't look quite right? So I'm going to click on shadow. So you can see it become white because I selected the layer mask instead of this adjustment layer. Okay, so I'm going to cancel it and come back to this layer adjustment and then go to this menu, auto options. And then I'm going to find the dark and light colors. And the shadow, I'm going to select the darkest tone of the image. It's over here, And highlight, I am going for, let me see where's the brightest area. Probably her nail. So I'm going to zoom in. It's a little bit pinkish anyway. So it's not quite what I think it should be. No. The mid-tone, let's try to get the mid-tone, which would be about the background, I guess. Okay. So it doesn't quite right to this one. So that's just bad. Let me just use another method. To match these two subjects' color, I have another video talk about a few methods that you can match the color of the subject. I will leave the link in the description. And now I'm just going to use one of the methods. I'm going to layer adjustment and select a solid color. I'm just going to use a very saturated color, for example, red. And I'm going to saturation, blending mode. And then immediately I can see these two images, what are the differences. This one got a lot of red and orange, and this one hasn't got that much, it's just a little bit. So what I would do is go on just on top of real layer, and I will add another curves adjustment layer, and I will clip it just to affect real. And then I will go to red channel. I will just bring up the red, because obviously it's redder. Okay, it's redder, this area. Okay, and I'm going to green area to bring some magenta, and I will drag it down. Perhaps just over here. That's just too much. You can see. I'm going to zoom in for you to see. Okay, just to match this red and orange tone. I'm going to bring it down a little bit, perhaps here. And then I'm going to the green layer, bring down the green and increase yellow. So you have more, you can see there's a more magenta tone. And this is like, I think it's about color over here. You can see these two color matching more about, that's too much magenta. That's about here, I think. Okay, so I'm going to remove this layer. And you can see this is before, this is after. Okay, so there's more red tone in real now. So that's more matching her color now. Just a subtle change, but it looks good. And then I'm going to remove this color fill because I've already done it. And maybe I would just reduce it to 80%, make it more subtle. I also want to adjust the contrast between these two subjects. They have to match as well. So I'm going to just use a black and white layer to see the brightness, if they are matching. They are pretty good already, but I will bring up a little bit more brightness on Rio's feathers over here. So I'm going to add layer, curve adjustment layer, and then I will clip on Rio, and then I'm just going to bring it up tiny bit here. Okay, just over here. Maybe the brightness comes down a little bit. Just a little bit over here. Okay, and a little bit more contrast here. Okay, so let's see. This is before, this is after. I think the bright part is a little bit too bright. And I'm going to just make coming down a little bit. That's before, that's after. Okay, so that looks very good already. And I lost a little bit shadow over here, so I'm going to use my brush. Just use a black brush to paint it over here. So it looks like pretty dark shadow over here. You see, this is before, this is after. And also here, I do not want to brighten his feet. Okay, here. I see before and after. Okay, so I'm going to delete this layer. We don't need it anymore. Delete this layer, we don't need it. So I'm going to apply a global adjustment, which I'm just going to add some color adjustment. I'm going to add some contrast. I'm going to use the black and white adjustment layer and just change it to soft light. And then I think this is true strong effect. So I'm going to bring it down, perhaps about 20% here. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit contrast just to bring up tiny bit here and down a little bit. Okay, let's see before and after. That's very subtle, but that looks great. Okay, and I'm going to add color balance. So I'm going to go for shadow first because I want to just adjust a little bit, sort of like vintage green tone at the back to match Rio's color. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit yellow tone in the back as well, just tiny bit, because the background is dark. That's why I'm saying shadow is the background. Okay, and I'm coming to highlights. Highlights, I'm going to add a little bit cyan, just tiny bit, and a little bit cooler here. Okay, let me see, maybe a little bit magenta, and then mid-tone. Let's play it with mid-tone. So let's have a look. I'm going to a little bit cyan here, and a little bit magenta, a little bit yellow tone. Okay, I'm going to come back to shadow to add a little bit more green, a little bit more cyan. Okay, so that's before, that's after. I can go on forever just to play with the color, but I can't. I'll make this tutorial too long. Okay, so that's just a global adjustment and it looks tons better, right? And I can also just add another curve adjustment layer, and then I will apply soft light. In fact, that's just too much, so I'm coming down. Maybe that's 9%. Just add some contrast in it. Let me just play with this. 20%. That looks pretty good. That looks really, really good. So I'm going to show you, this is before and this is after. I will give you this image of Rio so you can practice to cut out. This is a little bit tricky on the edges, but you were able to see how to do this in another video I just mentioned about how to cut the object out. So you will have Rio's photo. You can place on your shoulder, your fingers, or on top of your head. You name it, you can play with it, okay? So this is just a tutorial today. I hope you like the result. It's just so cute how they interact with each other. They're just so cute. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and give it a thumbs up if you find it helpful, and subscribe to our channel if you want to see more tutorials like this. And I'll see you in the next video.